ahead. I'm ready.
Dear Massimo, I'm very happy to have you after 6 years. In the last 6 years, so many things happened. We witnessed so many developments, not only in Central Asia, not only in the Middle East, but worldwide. We had the Brexit, we had 4 years of Trump administration. Also, people were very, very hopeful that Trump is going to take American international politics into more isolationist mode, but it was very unrealistic. And as we see with Joe Biden, lots of measures that were approved during Trump's administration are ongoing and are expanding, which shows that the international politics and geopolitical arena doesn't change that much as some people would wish it changes. I've been hearing about the collapse of the US and NATO for almost 50 years.
Forever. Yeah.
Forever, yes. I lost my hair, or my hair went white, and they're still talking about the same concepts and same geopolitical scenarios, which never fulfill. Even if I live 500 years, I'm not going to witness this type of changes that some geopolitical analysts and so-called experts are talking about for decades, forever. What do you think? What do you think about the recent withdrawal of NATO troops and particularly American troops from Afghanistan? Lots of people were, including again so-called experts, were watching in bewilderment how they withdrew from Afghanistan and what kind of chain reactions it initiated. Although we knew from January 2020 that withdrawal was a matter of time. So they didn't withdraw overnight.
Yes.
It was planned.
It was planned. Well, first of all, Saab, I think you pointed out some things that are very, very important to understand a little bit, from a general or even theoretical perspective, what we are talking about here, right? Indeed, changes occur in global politics, in geopolitical consideration, in international relations, but they are not changes that occur overnight. This is not something that changes, all of a sudden we are moving into a new world. These things change, but over a very long span of time. And I may be just a little bit younger than you, but yes, I've heard about the decline of the United States for the past 20, 25 years.
Exactly.
And guess what? The United States are still the hegemonic actor on the planet.
Yeah.
The other thing is that you correctly pointed out, very correctly, that Biden is basically following up, is pursuing some of the very same policies when it comes to international geopolitics that Trump was following. Hence, there is a logical inference to be made here that US foreign policy is less dependent on whoever sits in the White House than we tend to think, meaning that the United States have an interest as a country that does not depend on either Trump or Biden. Now, of course, the style, the way they presented themselves is so different. And of course, Trump can be pretty obnoxious to many people. Yeah. Biden to other people looks more like a proper gentleman. That's quite irrelevant, to be honest with you, Saib. It's like, it's a matter of personal style or the narrative that they give to their actions, but their actions are very much in continuity. And if I wanted to add more to this, they're in continuity even. We're not surprised that Biden is pursuing Obama-like policies, but Trump as well was pursuing Obama-like policies to an extent. All presidents understood that the United States needed to withdraw from some theaters that had been the stage of massive US military presence and efforts, and of course, economic and political intervention. And of course, Afghanistan and Iraq are the first two theaters that come to mind. And Obama started, thinking about we shall withdraw from Afghanistan. Trump said the same. And not only that, as you correctly pointed out, the Trump administration was the one that actually went to Doha in Qatar and basically signed a deal with the Taliban, even though they didn't. They used like a very complex wording to say that we're not actually talking with the Taliban, but those who are known as the Taliban because they didn't want to be associated immediately with the radical group. Be as it may, they were making this with the Taliban because they understood it was in the best interest of the United States to make that deal. As you said, absolutely, they made the deal in 2020. The withdrawal of troops was just a matter of time. Some Taliban were like, can we actually trust the Americans to actually go away after 20 years? Actually, yes, they could, because the Americans did leave. And my final point on this, perhaps, is that indeed, when the Americans withdrew on August the 15th, it was, I don't want to say a public image disaster, but we were close to that. I mean, it was not like an elegant withdrawal from Afghanistan. We all remember the images of people like clinging to airplanes, a very chaotic transition of power from the US-backed government to the Taliban regime. Look, for me, that's a public image blunder that does not impact medium, long term the capacity of the United States to remain what they are, the global hegemon. If anything, withdrawing from a place like Afghanistan shows, I cannot say, an acquired maturity on the part of the United States, i.e., they go where it really matters to their interests. And I have never been persuaded that Afghanistan was a place key for their strategic interests. It was in the middle of Central Asia, which is not an area where the United States have many interests, let alone vital interests. And it took some 20 years to the United States to do that, to realize that it was not overarching imperative in terms of their geopolitical calculations to remain in Afghanistan. We all know why they went to Afghanistan. At least, we know the official reasons.
Yeah, we know official reasons, of course.
Yeah. And of course, it was, because the Taliban didn't give bin Laden up after 9/11, and, they were collaborating with international terror, which was all true, I guess, to an extent. But again, if bin Laden was the main target of behind the invasion of Afghanistan, bin Laden was captured not by a massive military invasion of Afghanistan. It was captured by a small Navy SEAL operation. Special forces. They didn't need 100,000 soldiers to capture bin Laden. They needed 12 Navy SEALs. And they did it in 2011. So there was this huge miscalculation that if you wanted to go after bin Laden, you needed a police operation, not an invasion of a country. I will conclude perhaps by saying the following, that to my mind, we underestimate how much feelings and passion may impact the decision-making of some actors. I think the invasion of Afghanistan was on the heels of 9/11. And I remember those days vividly. I was younger, of course, was young, period. But I remember the upsurge of emotion.
In 2001, I was still in my 20s.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's like there was an emotional groundswell about we must do something. They destroyed the World Trade Center and attacked the Pentagon, right? Yeah. The nation needed some sort of like a vendetta against this, unknown enemy, this shadowy organization known as Al-Qaeda. And the Taliban were the closest state at the time thought to have links with Al-Qaeda. And rationally, it didn't make sense. They took 20 years to realize, okay, it doesn't make sense and we need to get out of there. So it may be a sign of wisdom, if anything else, with the United States withdrew from Afghanistan.
I have a bit different opinion about that. In '98, Al-Qaeda organized 2 attacks on U.S. embassies in Nairobi and in Tanzania.
Dar es Salaam, yep.
Yes, and these were very serious and bloody actions. So since 1998, Al-Qaeda was in a war with U.S. administration, whether led by Bill Clinton or later on by George Bush Jr. So it wasn't very surprising that they would try to organize something very big and very powerful in terms of media as the attack on New York City and Washington, D.C. But on the other hand, every empire in the history, and the U.S. is the most global empire so far, the most powerful empire so far, tends to use different military theaters and different global enemies, whether it's a Soviet communism, Nazism, or political Islam, in order to mobilize masses, to mobilize intellectuals, to mobilize people from academia who can justify these ventures. And at the same time, people who complain how much money the US military spent in Afghanistan forget that most of that sum went to salaries and expenses of the military itself. They're professional military. They're not made of conscripts and volunteers. Each foot soldier costs a certain amount of money. Each foot soldier from so-called allied countries like Poland or Ukraine or Montenegro costs a certain amount of money. So it's a very big business. And for 20 years, they filled their pockets, they filled their coffers with the money of their taxpayers, and they had the legitimate, they had a legit excuse to spend that money on fighting the global terrorism. And if they have to return back to Afghanistan, they can return in 6 months. I don't think they're gone. We saw in Iraq in 2010 and 2011.
I mean,
if you remember, if you recall well, in 2010 and 2011, Obama withdrew troops from Iraq. We had escalation of violence and increase of radical Islamist groups. We had the offensive of Daesh, or so-called Islamic State. And after a couple of weeks, the US Army came back. And now they have a problem to get rid of them again. So they're very mobile. So they can easily leave, but also they can easily come back.
Oh no, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you raised a number of excellent points, Saad. So let me try and respond or comment on those.
Yeah, please.
Indeed, you're right. Al Qaeda didn't show up all of a sudden on the world stage, at least for the security apparatus of the United States. They knew that something like Al Qaeda was operating. Indeed, they had already struck the United States in Tanzania and in Kenya. They also attacked a USS marine vessel in the Gulf of Aden in 2000. Yeah, exactly. And also, Bin Laden was not somebody like minced his words. He released a statement in 95 or 96, I can't recall, and he basically declared war on the Western world. I mean, the guy was not like hesitant or again on the fence. He declared what he wanted to do. That's why, to a great extent, people considered 9/11 as a massive failure of the U.S. internal security apparatus to prevent those people to carry out 9/11. The difference was that as long as you do attacks in Kenya and Tanzania, the U.S. public opinion will react in a certain fashion. If you attack New York City, then you have to respond in another fashion. People didn't, experience in the United States or in the West at large the kind of emotional reaction after 9/11, after the Kenyan and the Tanzanian attacks. It was just a different kind of level when it comes to propaganda and visibility on the world stage, of course, on the part of Al Qaeda. Now, what you mentioned also in terms of the US and the language that they use as an empire to maintain their empire is, again, very correct as well in my estimation, because as an empire, you need to have some sort of like a sense of a mission. Being an empire is not just having the largest military, it is also having the largest military is a necessary component of your power, but you also have to justify, legitimize to the world audience what you're trying to do. Yeah, and
your operations, true.
Look, you may or may not believe in what you say. You may be truthful or dishonest. I do not care actually about whether you really feel about democracy, what you say you feel about democracy. That's not important. The important thing is that the United States have a imperial mission, which is crafted in the language of human rights, democracy, free market capitalism, and all the rest of it. That's what they do on their business card. Other empires, of course, in history had different, business cards. The Soviets, of course, were not about spreading free market, right? They had something else in mind. But nevertheless, they had a imperial mission that competed with the United States imperial mission as well. We tend, I guess, to underestimate how important it is for an empire to have these sustaining ideologies, this sustaining message that props up their legitimacy internally and externally. It's an integral part of the process. And the other part, of course, of this project is, as you said, this incredibly effective military machine. Incredibly effective doesn't mean that they win all the wars. Of course, they kind of lost in Vietnam and they lost in Afghanistan, and they didn't fare much better when it was Iraq, of course, in the mix. But it is effective because, as you said, it's truly global. The United States, at a moment's notice, can intervene pretty much wherever they want in most countries on the planet in a matter of days. Not even, I don't think you need weeks. The United States has still, for example, soldiers stationed in Afghanistan and in other Central Asian republics. They have a military base in the middle of the Indian Ocean, Diego Garcia, which allows them to basically travel immediately to Central Asia at a moment's notice. So look, and it's not that you and I are the only ones who know this, right? The Taliban, of course, are aware of this. My bet is that the Americans, for quite some time, unless the Taliban do something egregious that really, compels them, forces them to go back into the country, they will stay outside for quite some time. But again, they have the possibility to do that. And that's what power is the possibility, is the capacity to do what you want if you want to pursue that. I think the United States now, they don't pursue, extending their presence in Central Asia. That's not in their interest. If it became their interest, they could do it.
They'll be back in a few weeks.
Oh yeah,
the way they came in 2001,
absolutely.
they'll return in 2022 or 2023, depends what's going on the global arena. But
Yep.
what's apparent and what was predictable from the beginning was that Taliban will crack down on women's rights, crack down on minorities, crack down on Shiites. Every Friday we have a massacre, at least at one of Shiite mosques, which means that the civil war, which is ongoing from 1979, will continue and maybe boost. It will be boosted by the weaponry which the US left to Taliban. They left them plenty of weapons and vehicles good for that type of guerrilla fighters. They didn't leave them submarines and nuclear bombs, but they left them conventional weaponry with which they can wage the war for another 10, 15 years. And it's a market. It's conflicts like Iraqi conflicts or Afghanistan are ongoing wars where each faction is supported by more or less the same international actors. And it will be interesting to see how China and Russia will interact with the Taliban regime. From many analysts, we've heard that it's a new Taliban government. They have nothing to do with the Talibans who ran the country between 1996 and 2001. But we see that they're nullifying all fragile rights that different groups had in Afghanistan. As I said before, the motive for the intervention wasn't to boost Afghani female soccer team, but to open the new market for the American and Western military. So militarism was the main gainer of 20 years of constant conflict and 20 years of so-called insurgency fighting. Now they decided to withdraw for a while. And it would be smart to wait and see what will happen on the ground, instead of rushing with conclusions and announcing that China and Russia are taking over the world and the US and NATO are collapsing. It doesn't make any sense.
No.
Because
thank you, Sam, for pointing out.
Because in the Middle East, where I live, actually they increased the number of military installations and bases in the last 10 years. I was checking some data a few years ago and realized that they have over 24 military installations and military bases in the Middle East. And later on, maybe this year, I was again checking my data and realized that they almost reached 30 military installations. In Jordan, in fact, they have new air bases in the east of the country.
So much for a U.S. withdrawal from the Middle East.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
So they're not withdrawing, of course. They're just regrouping the army, like in a popular strategical games. If you play Risiko or some of these games, you push your forces from one field to another, from one theater to another.
Absolutely. And again, as I said, I interpret this as a sign of so the United States are becoming smarter as of late in where to really engage and pour resources in, right? They're becoming a little more selective. They don't go to a place because they can. They go to a place because they have to, or they feel their interests are relevant in that area. And of course, area around Syria, for example, in Jordan, in Iraq, that's much more strategically important for them than it is Afghanistan. And they're we're going to relocate troops. We're going to, switch our concentration around the area. I mean, the Middle East is a vast area, of course. And Afghanistan, I'm not even sure it's part of the Middle East. People do not usually consider it part of the Middle East.
Yeah.
I tend to subscribe to that view. But to your points about the Taliban regime itself and the other two big actors in the region, Russia and China, right? There are a couple of things that we may want to highlight here. First of all, the Taliban. Look, like all political actors, they have learned some stuff. The Taliban are not stupid. They may not be nice or particularly likable if you do not share their ideology, but they're not stupid. They understood that what they did between 1996 and 2001 has some costs when it comes to international recognition. So they're caught in a sort of a dilemma. They need, at the moment, this international recognition also to access international credit, international foreign currency, in order to pay for everything the country needs. And Afghanistan needs pretty much everything at this time. At the same time, their ideology and their worldview kind of shapes those very behaviors and those very policies that you highlighted. So they are incredibly misogynistic. They are not in favor of any semblance of democratic or liberal government that we kind of cherish in the West, or whatever you want to call it.
Or even basic religious rights. They crack down on
absolutely,
on all other schools of Islam, including Shiites.
Absolutely.
And do you think that it may cause a tension between Afghanistan and Iran if they still continue to kill Shiites on a weekly basis?
Absolutely. And that's when things get really dicey for the Taliban, because they're caught between two different poles, right? One which is more rational and strategic, and the other one which is more ideological. And they need to balance between the two. They are also confronted by the so-called ISIS-K, ISIS Khorasan, which for people in the West, perhaps it's absurd that radical Islamists fight each other. Actually, it happens all the times everywhere, right? Absolutely. So the Taliban are, coming from a different ideological orientation, the Deobandi school of northern India, whereas ISIS technically is a Salafi group. Regardless of these differences, they are at odds when it comes to what they want to do in Afghanistan. And yes, ISIS has risen, paradoxically perhaps, as the most important domestic threat to the Taliban regimes. And as you said, I think we have to wait and see how they're going to handle a local insurgency coming this time from another radical Islamist formation. So that's going to determine a lot of what the Taliban can accomplish in Afghanistan, considering also that Afghanistan has never been truly under the government, whoever is in charge in either Kabul or Kandahar or other major cities. It's a country that is, very, very hard to control, as everybody knows. It's, from the British in the 19th century all the way to the Soviets and all the Americans. The Taliban are pretty much in the same conundrum. They can hardly control the entirety of a country, which is primarily, made up of mountains and valleys, which is really, really hard to have a firm grip on. And it's a perfect place if you want to establish some sort of insurgency against any kind of central government. The Taliban followed this recipe against the Americans, and now the ISIS is following similar steps against the Taliban in charge. So we'll see how the situation evolves. Now, given all this, given how incredibly tough Afghanistan is to control, the Americans are like, we're going to pull away for the moment at least, and we're going to leave this hot potato in the hands of the Russians and the Chinese. Let them deal with this kind of mess and let them be entangled in this mess for the longest time, because just as we drained a lot of resources in the past 20 years, it's their time now to focus on this Central Asian country, which for Russia and China is a little bit different than the United States from purely geographic perspective, because China, the Afghanistan is probably the furthest country away from the United States in terms of distance on the world map. But China borders with Afghanistan, and Russia has basically a whole bunch of semi-satellites, all the stands, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, that border with Afghanistan.
It's a soft belly.
So
it's a soft belly of Russia. Afghanistan
absolutely.
And Central Asian states are the soft belly of Russian Federation. And
it's always been like this.
Theoretically, one can control Afghanistan if that power commits a massive genocide of killing 2 or 3 million people and civilians. Technically, you can do that. But the old good days of massive genocides are gone, and no one is going to get involved into that kind of a bloody mess. We don't live in 1942 or in 1915.
Yeah, I think you stand correct as well. It's not a practice, it's not a tactic you can use anymore to control Afghanistan.
Now we have the rule of law and the rule of human rights. So that kind of action is inappropriate, and it will be counterproductive. Do you think
Yeah.
that China will benefit economically with cooperation with Afghanistan in coming months?
So it's a very good question, Saib. And I don't want to say I don't know because I kind of don't know, but I want to, yeah. So what I found out recently is that Afghanistan has been, they have found many mineral resources in Afghanistan beyond the usual precious, stones and stuff that, people knew they were in Afghanistan. But recently they have this, and by recently I mean over the past 1 or 2 years, not long ago. So there's a lot of zinc, iron, uranium, marble, things that could be actually a significant economic resource for a country that would like to get its hands on it. China, of course, is at the forefront of this. Apparently, they have already established a plan for excavation and mining procedures not far from Kabul. So China is thinking about that. Now, there are a couple of things here that may make the situation for China, A, not immediately exploitable, and two, quite problematic in the larger picture. What do I mean by that? One is that even if there are proven resources, such as the ones that I just mentioned, it's not that you can start exporting these kind of things overnight. You need to establish all sorts of infrastructures, mining complex industries, and proper roads and stuff like that to actually export the minerals out of Afghanistan. And that takes years to actually have a proper mining and extractive industry. Number one. Number two, how does China deal with the Afghanistan political instability? Because you can only do business to an extent if the country is a mess when it comes to internal security. And I say this particularly in the context of the famous, One Belt, One Road initiative that has one of its main legs in Pakistan. There's one of the major portion of the One Belt, One Road initiative for China is to go through Pakistan. It's called the CPEC, Chinese-Pakistani Economic Corridor, that basically tries to open up the Indian Ocean to China by crossing into Pakistan. Now, there are all sorts of plans to do this. The project is currently undergoing, but the main path that China would like to use in Pakistan goes quite close across a region, the northwest frontier province, and then Balochistan, which is very close to Afghanistan. And any instability, political instability that may trickle outside of Afghanistan would jeopardize this project. We're talking about insurgency, constant insurgency that would jeopardize the possibility to build infrastructures, to run transports and extraction activities in this area. As a matter of fact, maybe a month ago, China has committed, for example, to renovate part of the Karachi harbor, which is the main port in Pakistan, where I used to live for 4 years, by the way, and switch their attention away from the area next to Afghanistan to bring it closer to the eastern part of Pakistan, which is further away from that problematic border. So China is like, yeah, Afghanistan may be an opportunity in terms of natural resources and business opportunities. It is also a risk, potentially, because it may jeopardize, due to its political instability, the whole CPEC project, which is such a key pivotal part of their One Belt, One Road initiative. So you said you and I are here waiting and see what happens in Afghanistan. China is not that different from us to an extent. They need to see whether the Taliban government can really enforce some sort of stability in order for their business as usual plan to go on. And time will tell, I guess.
Now we can move to so-called Abrahamic diplomatic initiative. And so far, it was very successful in 2020. They managed to sign deals with UAE, with Bahrain, with Morocco, with Sudan. Everybody's waiting to see whether Saudi Arabia is going to join them, although everybody also knows that Saudi Arabia and so-called Zionist entity are in bed for decades. This is nothing new that we don't know. They have the same allies, and the vital interests of both countries are interconnected through the US. We can even talk about the same people in politics, in media, in security, who operate in both Israel and the States. So what do you think about so-called Abrahamic deal or deal of the century?
Yeah. It was part of the deal of the century.
They have all kinds of interesting names for these initiatives.
Yeah.
Catchy names.
Americans are really good. Look, Americans are really good in propaganda things, and whenever they come up with a name, usually it's a very good name. I mean, they have Hollywood for a reason, right? And they know how to do this kind of stuff. Yeah, they're very good. I give it to them. All jokes aside, it is, I think a few decades from now, when we will study the Israeli-Palestinian issue or the Israeli position in the Middle East, this, the late 2010s, the early 2020s will be one of those pivotal times that we remember, like the Camp David Accords with Egypt, the Wadi Araba and the Oslo Accords in 1994 and 1993. So it's one of those ground-swelling moments that, as we said at first, right, they do occur in politics. In politics, there is change, only happens every 20 to 30 years, perhaps, and we need to be alerted to this possibility. Now, the Abraham Accords are a very interesting project, and of course, nobody asks me here to comment on their ethical or moral import, of course, but they're a very interesting project because, first of all, how they were framed, because they were framed as peace agreements, even though none of the countries in the Arab world that signed the Abraham Accords, like Bahrain or the Emirates or Morocco, were ever at war with Israel. They never sent troops to fight in any of the Arab-Israeli conflicts. So to call them a peace agreement is somewhat improper. They are basically a diplomatic recognition agreement, which is to say that all the countries that have now come on board with this plan, which entails the official recognition, establishment of embassies, exchanging of ambassadors, and now direct flights between, for example, Manama in Bahrain and Tel Aviv. This whole package deals with countries that for the longest time were ready, at least from an economic and diplomatic standpoint, to recognize Israel. If they didn't do it, is because, as you said, the patron, the hegemon, the United States, hadn't yet found a way to master of managing this. Now the situation was ready, and the deal could be struck, which speaks to me to a couple of consideration that we may make here. First of all, one is very simply an economic deal. Israel and Arab economies, especially Arab economies of the Gulf, are highly compatible. Israel is a high technology, high income country, high social and human capital that has no natural resources, basically. Whereas the Gulf states are basically its opposites. Not very high technology in most sectors, but they are very well endowed, of course, with natural resources. So it's, economically speaking, is just a very rational and strategic thing to do. The other consideration, which is not economic, is political or even identity-based, if I may, because you mentioned the deal of the century, which was part of this overarching plan of the United States when it comes to the Palestinians, because we should remember the Abraham Accords indirectly deal with the Palestinians, right?
They're part of Abrahamic Accord.
Yeah, they're part of the plan, but the specific project that was called the deal of the century, that pertained specifically to the Palestinians, has not been implemented, which means that the Palestinians have seen their other Arab countries, fellow Arabs, striking a deal with Israel, pursuing their own national and state-based interest without actually paying, any real attention to what were the consequences for the Palestinians in this regard. The Palestinians were offered this deal of the century by the Trump administration that was basically, again, an economic based agreement, i.e., it was a similar logic to what was offered to the other Arab states, an economic deal with Israel. The main issue, of course, is that the Arab Emirates, Bahrain and Morocco are states, so they don't have many political qualms with Israel. The Palestinians are not a state. For them, for the Palestinians, the political side of things is still preeminent over any economic deal that they may or may not secure with Israel, and conversely with the United, under the auspices of the United States. So when the deal of the century came together with the whole framework of the Abraham Accords, the Palestinians are like, you cannot disregard the political implications of this deal because we don't have a political a stake in this. It would be just a sellout of our political ambitions and political desires and political wishes on the altar of sort of like an economic deal under the auspices of the United States with Israel. That they thought about 15. I can't recall exactly what was the sum of foreign direct investment promised to the occupied territories of Palestine. But again, it was just an injection of capital into the Palestinian economy without ever speaking of political issues, not just economic issues. And the Palestinians, by and large, refused that proposition. But again, the upshot, the consequence is that fewer and fewer Arab countries are actually sharing nowadays, if they ever really did, of course, the predicaments of the Palestinians. They are like, the Palestinians have their own issues, but we have our own strategic national and state interests. And when they had to wage between the two, they decided to go with the latter, of course, as opposed to the former.
Then we can say that Oslo peace deal is officially dead. I mean, it's been dead since 1995 when they assassinated Yitzhak Rabin, and Oslo peace deal was undermined from Zionist side since 1996, when Netanyahu became the prime minister for the first time.
Yeah,
we saw that this year he stepped down. They have another American Ashkenazim running Israel.
Yeah.
We have Bennett, who came from California, unlike Milikovsky or Netanyahu, how he likes to call himself, who came from the East Coast, from Philadelphia. It seems that situation is back to pre-Oslo time, when they controlled the borders between Jordan and Palestine.
Look, the Oslo Accords, you're right. So we've been wrong about the decline of the United States. We've been right about the death of the Oslo Accords. In the Oslo Accords, even when they were signed, a lot of Palestinians outside the PLO understood what those agreements were. There were a fantastic photo shoot opportunities in the White House lawn for Yitzhak Rabin, Bill Clinton, and Yasser Arafat. But the problem with the Oslo Accords was that the Palestinians granted recognition to Israel as a state without receiving the same, recognition in turn. The PLO was just recognized as the representative of the Palestinian, but there was no mention of a Palestinian state in the Oslo Accords. And, we don't have time here to go over the last 28 years of history.
No, we'll continue that in our second conversation.
Yes. Look, absolutely. But the main thing is that the logic of the Accords, at least of the Oslo Accords, was that eventually the famous Declaration of Principle, the DOP, said that, you know, we were moving towards a two-state solution, which has become and still is, unfortunately, this very hypocritical way to say how we're going to solve the Israeli-Palestinian issue. Where we're going to have a two-state solution. It's not impossible because the documents were poorly crafted or drafted, you know, with the improper language. It's impossible because on the ground you cannot create a Palestinian state anymore. It's impossible. Because the settlements have already taken a lot of the land.
We have over 1 million Zionist settlers in the West Bank, and they're growing in number. In 10, 15 years, there'll be maybe 2-3 million of Zionists there. I deliberately didn't use word Israelis or Jews because I want to be very precise. People who come to the West Bank, to Judea and Samaria, from ideological perspective, are political Zionists, regardless of their ethnicity and ethnic background. I'll stop here because I know that you're very busy, and we will definitely continue as soon as you're free and available for talk. If you want to add something, please.
No, I just add, Saad, it's always great to talk to you. I'm really glad to have joined you for this conversation. Of course, you know, we'll be in touch, and whenever you feel like having another conversation, I'll be more than happy. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. All the best.
Thank you. Goodbye. Ma salama.
Bye.